Chapter 20: The Fall of the Money System. Long before the Cooperative Alliance was formed, the cooperativist factions in the rest of the European countries became more numerous. The most fervently capitalistic Western countries, the United States, Great Britain, France, Germany, Spain, and Australia, being so firmly embedded in the capitalistic way of life, proved to be the most staunch and powerful opponents of cooperatism. Not that there weren't a great many supporters of cooperatism in those countries, but the immense power of those against it held tremendous sway over public opinion. At first, after the election of the Cooperativist Party in Belgium, and in the early stages of the national transition, it was believed by the capitalists that cooperatism would, in a short time, fail. Therefore, it was allowed to do so. This belief in cooperatism's ultimate self-demise, along with an extreme shortage of funding due to the global depression, is what prevented these various governments from formally and officially taking clandestine steps to prevent this revolution. Once it was realized that the new system was proving successful, it became more difficult to disrupt that success, much less prevent it, especially amidst the efforts that needed to be directed toward their own economic recoveries. However, with time, resources were freed up to launch a campaign of propaganda against cooperatism. In America in particular, one of the strongest, if not the strongest nation at that time, a great deal of effort was devoted to promoting flag waving, claiming that cooperatism was not consistent with the principles that America was founded on: free enterprise and the right of every individual to pursue life, liberty, and happiness in whatever way they chose. Cooperatism, they said, takes away these inalienable rights by locking an individual into a group-oriented philosophy where individual rights and freedoms became subservient to the group. This was a strong argument for many because of their fervent patriotism and their belief that America was the foremost example of liberty in the world. The argument was also given power and validity because it linked cooperatism closely to communism, which was also seen as the antithesis and enemy of capitalism, Western democracy, freedom, and therefore America. If these ideas could successfully be implanted into the public consciousness, then America would see the fight against cooperatism as self-preservation, instigating a very passionate opposition. Fueled by this misrepresentation, Americans would come out guns a-blazing. There was a precedent in their history for this kind of fiercely patriotic response, and this had worked so effectively in the past when there was a need and desire to get the full support of the American public behind some cause, such as a new war. The ocean between them and Europe buffered most Americans from the reality of cooperatism. They were more susceptible to media denouncing the favorable information available on the internet. Britain, France, and Germany all considered attempting some sort of military coup in Belgium, but this was quickly dismissed as being foolhardy. There was no specific controlling government to oust. The government was the people themselves. The military was also the people themselves, guarding against any given group attaining any sort of overall national power or control. The people were in a sort of solidarity to protect their newfound freedom and way of life. It would take more than a small, well-armed group to gain control over this country. Everyone and every region was now self-sufficient and independent. Even if you could gain control of what might be considered the government, you would gain no discernible advantage. Nor was there any way to apply economic sanctions against the cooperative system. The countries and corporations that were trading with Belgium found they were very much benefiting from the arrangement and weren't going to jeopardize their favorable economic position. There was no way to gain any political leverage by being generous with campaign donations. There was no monetary means by which to manipulate these people. There were no large groups of dissatisfied and oppressed citizens to draw support from. Life was better and freer than it had ever been. Other than an all-out declaration of war against this cooperative alliance, which would clearly not have been supported by the people of these capitalistic countries, for it would have been seen as an unprovoked act of aggression, there seemed to be very little the capitalists could do other than slandering and mudslinging. But their propaganda was steadily undermined by visitors to Belgium and later to the other 6 countries in the cooperative alliance. Visitors would return home with a more truthful account of the system and communicate this to their friends. Clashes and heated arguments ensued between those who believed the propaganda and those who did not. More than a few of these clashes led to violence of some kind. Following the Depression, the monetary system worldwide was never able to achieve its previous status. It remained a shadow of its former self. The cooperative alliance further weakened the already struggling European economy because, other than the purchasing of limited amounts of natural resources, the countries in the cooperative alliance were no longer a significant consumer market. Everything was handled by the internal workforce of these countries. Very little was purchased outside of the alliance, and nothing needed to be purchased within the alliance. Resources, industries, information, personnel, and services were all shared. However, like Belgium, these other alliance members became suppliers. The countries in the alliance came to dominate a significant number of the international markets and, ironically, acquired an overabundance of capital. They used it to allow their citizens to freely travel abroad, each one being an ambassador of cooperatism. Other European countries, sometimes out of an economic necessity or sometimes out of the simple desire of the common people, joined the alliance. The Czech Republic, Slovenia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Greece, and Italy. One by one, they converted. One by one, they joined the alliance. With each new member, the world markets shrunk further, and the alliance gained more shared geography and resources. The larger Western capitalistic countries were able to hold out longer because internally and between them, they still maintained a sizable consumer base to support the national economies. However, more and more of the general populace in these countries realized that clinging to the money system was becoming a disadvantage. Even the most adamant defenders of capitalism and the money system could not help but see that capitalism and the money system in general were in decline. The cooperative supporters in these countries continued to grow and organize and raise people's awareness. It became blatantly obvious that only the wealthy were benefiting from a continued allegiance to capitalism, not the common man. The economic tactics of Dietger Gillard that had proved so successful in destroying the economy and entrenched wealth and power of controlling elites were implemented throughout the Western Hemisphere, severely crippling the economic means to counter the cooperativist trend. People stopped paying taxes and stopped complying with government mandates. And when the military and law enforcement were called upon to enforce compliance, they began to conscientiously refuse to take up arms against their fellow citizens. It didn't take a great deal of pressure to push these economies to their breaking point. They began to fail little by little. Survival became increasingly difficult for those still hanging on to capitalistic or other money-dependent regimes such as communism. The communists were able to hold on to their military control of the people longer than the capitalists, but in the end, every economy collapsed due to the pressure exerted from within and without, and every regime collapsed along with them. And this marked the end of the reign of the money system. It was usurped and replaced after dominating human existence for thousands of years. The era of cooperatism had begun, and civilization began to flourish as it had never flourished before. The common man had finally been liberated, and with that liberation, an explosion of progress ensued in every direction.